Java 18 is here. There's controversy over Google Cloud's price increase. There's a new look for MDN. There's a mysterious NPM package that does nothing, but has over 700,000 downloads. And we're going to be looking at the new Java Developer Productivity Report from JRebel. All this and more in this episode of The Artifact. I'm going to dive right into the news that you should know. The big news is, of course, a new version of Java is here. JDK 18 is here. So if you're Java developers, this is cause to celebrate. You have a new version of Java that was released, JDK 18. The reference implementation of Java 18 is now generally available. Okay, so it's in GA. So there are a bunch of features that's introduced with this Java version. To be honest, this is a little light on features. There are not a lot of important features for you to consider using. And also, this is not a long-term support version. Okay, JDK 17 was the LTS. You must have seen these, people talking about how they were, some people who are stuck in Java 8 and they want to move, they move to Java 11, right? Why do they move to Java 11? They move to Java 11 because that's a long-term support version. It's supported for an extended period of time as opposed to these other versions which are short support periods. So after Java 11, the next long-term support version is Java 17, okay, which is the version before this. JDK 18 is not LTS. So you can choose to use it and play around with it. It's good to know what features it has. But if you're considering moving to a newer version of Java in your enterprise, in your company, hopefully you're on Java 11 and you're moving to Java 17. If you're on Java 8 or something like that, don't bother with Java 11 now. There is a new LTS, which is Java 17. You should switch to that. Okay, so this is a new version, which is not LTS. There are some bunch of features, again, not feature heavy, but it's good to know what they are. So the first one is UTF-8 by default. I'm not going to go through all the features, but just some important ones. So basically, this is to help when you're opening files. You are, the character code that the APIs use, the native Java APIs use, is basically dependent on what the default char set is for your system, right? So you might be opening a file and you don't specify what the character code is that you're expecting from your contents. On one system, it could be some other character char set. Another system, it could be some other char set. So it is not predictable what char set you're opening it in. So with this, you're basically having UTF-8 as the default character set when you're opening and you're not specifying what the character code is. It makes it consistent, right? And UTF-8 is like the most common character set, right? So this is applicable throughout all the standard Java APIs where you need to specify a character set. This is kind of backward incompatible because let's say you're working on a Java application and you have a system which is not UTF-8 and you haven't specified your character set and it's using whatever was the default one. Well, now we're in trouble because by default, it's UTF-8. But hopefully you're not doing that. It's not a good idea to do that anyway. So by default, you're going to get UTF-8 as, the default char set for most Java APIs. This is an interesting one, JEP 408. There is a simple web server that's bundled into Java, bundled into the JDK. Okay, so this is not like a servlet container. It's not like Tomcat or Jetty or whatever else. It is just a static HTTP file server, right? You can create an index.html file and spin up a web server, a simple web server, and it's going to host that HTML file, okay? So the release says an out-of-the-box static HTTP file server with easy setup and minimal functionality, reducing developer activation energy, making JDK more approachable, offering a default implementation via command line together with a small API for programmatic creation and customization. Basically, the idea is you can type a CLI command and spin up an HTTP web server at a certain directory. So the directory contents are going to be exposed as on HTTP that you can access. It's going to run on your local machine. You can also have API access. So you can write Java code to spin up the simple HTTP server. Again, the key to remember is this is HTTP server. It's not a servlet container. It's not an application server. It just hosts static HTML files. I believe there are certain methods that are not allowed as well. Like you can do a get I believe you cannot do like a post because you're not updating anything, right? You're just using it for read-only purposes. Very simple, but if you want to have a simple server, well, this is how you do it. There are a bunch of stuff here associated with Project Panama and Project Loom, where are two important projects that are coming up. They're not ready for JDK 18. They're hopefully going to show up in JDK 19, but we don't know. So just to give you an idea, Project Panama is a project which allows you to code Java with underlying APIs which are non-Java. So for example, if you want to interface with a C library, you have better support for writing Java code to call those C in native binary APIs from Java. Project Loom is an alternative way of doing concurrency and handling threads, so that you're not restricted by the threads of your, like right now, Java threads are analogous to operating system threads. Whenever you start a Java thread object is basically like this wrapper around, basic underlying operating system thread. So with Project Loom, they're planning to make this a little better in order to support higher performance multi-threading. That's also a feature that's coming up. It's not available in JDK 18. But they're kind of setting the stage with a bunch of JEPs that are going in. This one's interesting. I quite like this. So there is a code snippet improvement in Java API documentation. Now, Java API docs can contain code snippets and examples, and these are things that you can use right away. I would recommend you use it. Basically, the idea is you have Java doc, and inside the Java doc, you write, okay, what is the method, here's what you do, and all that. And then here you can write code about example usage of your APIs and libraries. Okay, so you add a pre-tag in your Java doc, and then you can add this @code syntax, and then you can write the code over here. This used to be the way. Let me show you this, the actual way you do this. Okay, here's how you actually do this. So instead of doing the pre, which would have mapped to what the Java doc would render, right? A pre is actually HTML syntax, right? So whatever you put over here would get rendered as pre in HTML, and that's the reason why you put the pre here. With this new snippet support, you don't need to put the pre. You add this @snippet syntax, and then it is going to use that as a code snippet. So you do the curly braces @snippet and then colon, and then you can add your code snippet there, and that is going to go in your Java doc. So you can have actual code snippets in your Java doc. It's pretty cool. Let's see. There are a few others which are like preview and incubators are all things which are coming. Incubators, basically, they put something in there and they're kind of incubating the feature. So Vector API is again for Project Panama for native API calls. There is a foreign function which is again Project Panama. There is one finalization feature which is deprecated. I haven't used it. I hope you're not using it. If you happen to be using it, go check it out. Make sure you refactor your code. So this is Java 18, JDK 18 general availability. If you want to play around with these features, you can go download it and run it. All right. Next in the news. This is something which is useful for web developers. If you write HTML, CSS, JavaScript, you must have encountered a website called MDN. MDN is a Mozilla Developer Network. It is the recommended resource for anything to do with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. If you have questions, you need to look up documentation, don't go anywhere else. Just go to MDN. No matter what your search engine says, MDN is like the resource. So MDN was redesigned lately. Okay, it's been, I think, a week or 2 weeks since this happened. So the webpage announcing it says, the MDN community is the reason our content can be counted on to be both high quality and trustworthy. Here's the thing though, MDN is community contributed, all right? MDN content is scrutinized, discussed, and in some cases argued about. Anyone can contribute to MDN either by writing content, suggesting changes, or fixing bugs. So the new homepage, they've redesigned it, was built with a focus on core concepts of community and simplicity. We've improved search, a central element on the page, while also showing users a selection of the newest and most read articles. Search is super useful because you typically tend to use MDN for reference. At least that's what I do. Like I go to a search engine and then search for something, and then among the top search results you get MDN, and then I just go pick that. Now here, because there's improved search, I'm going to try this out. I'm going to go directly to MDN from now on, and I'm going to do a search. There's a new UI, so definitely recommend checking that out. According to the blog post, it says there's more consistent coloring and theming, better signposting of major sections, improved accessibility, and there's a dark mode. Everybody loves dark mode, right? My IDE is dark mode. I don't want to switch to a reference page, which is bright and hurts my eyes. Dark mode is awesome. All right. In addition to a redesign of MDN, here's the thing which is a little controversial, but here's there. It's Mdn Plus. Okay, so they have released a non-free version of MDN. Okay, there is a premium subscription service, Mdn Plus, and they're releasing 3 features. They're not big features which are like you're going to absolutely miss. The core reference part is still there and you can still use it. These are additional features that they've tagged onto. I know a lot of developers actually donate money to MDN because they want to, they use it a lot and they want to help in its growth. Here is another way you can contribute money to MDN and perhaps support their growth. There are 3 features that they're made available in Mdn Plus. So first is notifications. Technology is ever changing and we know how important it is to stay on top of the latest updates and developments. From tutorial pages to API references, you can now get notifications for the latest developments on MDN. When you follow a page, you'll get notified when that documentation changes. CSS features launch and API ships. So basically, when something changes in whatever you're following, you get a notification, right? That's again a part of the paid offering. There's another feature called collections, where you can bundle a bunch of topics and articles together and mark it as a collection, and you can kind of switch and get to the article that you're interested in the most. And the third feature is Mdn Offline, which allows you to access the MDN documentation even when you don't have an internet connection. Right? They build it as PWA. Folks, if you don't know, PWA stands for Progressive Web Application, which uses a bunch of service workers to do a bunch of cool things, including offline access. They are planning to expand this to multiple countries. Right now, it's available only in the US and Canada, but they plan to expand this to a bunch of other countries later. Okay, so this is Mdn Plus, a paid offering for MDN, which I highly recommend. Whether you go for the paid offering or not, please check out MDN for anything related to web. It's a really good resource. There was another website called W3 Schools, and for the longest period of time, Google would put their articles at the top. I don't know if they were doing some search engine optimization or something like that. You have any question about JavaScript or HTML, W3 Schools result would be the first thing that comes up. The website used to be really, really bad. Now it is just kind of bad, not too bad, but MDN is definitely much better and definitely recommended when you want to do references for HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. All right, next in the news, JavaOne is here, finally. All right, there was a little bit of a break in JavaOne, which is the Oracle-led conference about Java. So the announcement says Oracle's tech conferences were canceled during the pandemic. The last Oracle Developer Conference was in 2019 in San Francisco. The plan was to move it to Las Vegas in 2020, but that did not happen. Well, now JavaOne is being hosted at Las Vegas, October 2022. All right. So they also had to change the name for a bunch of different reasons I'm not going to get into. JavaOne was actually called CodeOne. All right. So 2018 and 2019, I had actually been to this conference. They called it CodeOne, and now they've brought the Java name back. It's called JavaOne again. Okay. JavaOne is coming. Here is another interesting news that I want to share because it's so much fun and so much, so weird. So there's a mysterious NPM package that has over 700,000 downloads, and it does nothing. Okay, there's an NPM package in Node.js library dependency, which does nothing. Right, it has some code, but it's pretty much a no-op. But it has 700,000 downloads. What does it do? Why does it have 700,000 downloads? Well, the reason is in its name, the package name is called dash, not DASH. It's literally the symbol dash, the minus. It has only one version 0.0.1. It contains 3 files, index.js, package.json, and readme.md. And it has very bare bones code. I believe it's just pulling in TS node and it does nothing else. Now, the question is, why does it have so many downloads? Here's another interesting thing. This dash package is used by over 50 packages. 50 other packages have a dependency on this mysterious NPM package called dash. Why? Well, the reason, it turns out, is because of the way you install packages in NPM. So when you install a package in NPM, you do npm package name, and then you specify flags, right? You say --save, --save dev. There is a -g to indicate that you want to save a package globally, you want to install a package globally. So these are flags that you pass to npm install. Now, imagine what happens when you accidentally put a space in your command, right? You just say npm dash and then there is a space and a g. What ends up happening is npm assumes that is a package name and it's going to try and download it. Well, somebody here has created a package name called dash. And now for all the typos where there is a dash in your npm install command, npm is going to go fetch this package and it is going to install it. Okay, so that explains the 700,000 downloads, 720,000 downloads really. But now, how does it explain the dependencies? Well, it turns out some people, at least 50 people, have done this. They've made a typo and they've installed this dash dependency and they haven't noticed it. Okay, they have checked in the code and their M project, whatever it is, their NPM module or whatever, is still depending on this dash package that they added by accident, but it's still there, right? So this is the mysterious package name called dash, which has 700,000 downloads. I wanted to show this and let you folks know about this because these are things which could potentially be security issues. If the owner of this dash package could write code which is malicious, and now anybody who makes a typo, they get this package installed, right? You still have to use it to run malicious code, but it's like once the code goes into a user's machine, it's like just one step away from kind of taking control, right? You can write whatever code you want, publish it as this package, and then now it goes to everybody's machine, right? Scary stuff. But thankfully, this person has mentioned that it was just a joke project and they mean no harm. Oh, well, this was fun stuff. All right. Okay, I'm going to go to the next news item here. This is interesting. So this was another thing which got a lot of controversy. So Google Cloud have kind of increased their pricing. Okay, kind of increased their pricing. And they announced it with this blog post. And look at the title of this blog post, right? You wouldn't know that they've increased pricing by reading this. Look at the title. It says, "Unlock more choice with updates to Google Cloud's infrastructure capabilities and pricing." Who knows what this is about? I go to the head tag, and then the head tag here says, "Updates to Google Cloud's infrastructure pricing." Well, that's a little more close to what they have in mind. So here's the thing. There is this kind of implicit belief, a kind of implicit understanding that cloud pricing is static. Okay, so you move to the cloud. You say, okay, I'm gonna create like 10 EC2 instances and this S3, so many S3, whatever. Right? You have your cloud infrastructure. You have a fair idea about pricing. You know how much you're gonna pay for how much infrastructure. There is this implicit kind of like assumed guarantee that the price is not going to change. Imagine you move all your stuff to AWS and a month from now, AWS says, okay, all pricing double. That's not going to be fun, right? So people kind of assume that that's not going to happen. Cloud providers kind of guarantee informally guarantee that that's not going to happen. And if anything, cost of the cloud is always going down because it's easier and easier and cheaper to make new hardware and more powerful hardware as that technology evolves and gets better. It's actually cheaper to create hardware and run these things at the same price. So it's probably like, cloud providers can hold that same price and actually make more money because the underlying hardware cost is reducing, right? So people don't expect cloud pricing to increase, but Google has gone and done just that. It's not like an overall increase in the pricing. They have kind of, mixed the message. There is a question, will the customer's bills increase or decrease? And they say the impact on the pricing change depends on the customer's use cases and usage. While some customers may see an increase in their bills, we'll also introduce new options for some services to better align with their usage, which could lower some customers' bills, which means that some people are going to will have to pay more, right? They will have to pay more. Some people have to pay less. So it is unpredictable. And people weren't happy about this. There were a few posts that I noticed where people were a little like, yeah, this is not supposed to happen, right? So here is an InfoQ page. It's an article about this thing, growing concerns among developers about Google Cloud price increases. Google Cloud recently announced changes to their pricing models with storage and data transfer costs mostly affected, right? It mostly affects if you're using storage and data transfer a lot. Many experts in the cloud community have been raising concerns about architectural implications and the end of a long-term prices never go up cloud tenet. There is this implicit tenet that prices never go up, but that's not likely to be the case for long. Yes, hardware prices are going to go down. So in essence, it's probably more cost efficient, even if the cloud provider retains the same pricing. But you also have inflation, and these cloud providers will have to accommodate that. It's not just hardware that goes into managing these cloud services. So it's interesting to see how that impacts organizations who are moving to the cloud or considering to move to the cloud. Because the whole premise of the cloud is it's all about cost, right? There is nothing that you can do on AWS or Azure or Google Cloud that you cannot build your own infrastructure and do on your own, right? All of that is possible to do on your own. The only reason you would go to the cloud is to save on cost. Both cost in terms of, like, I don't want to get the hardware to accommodate the peak load. I want it to be elastic, right? So I just pay for what I'm using, which you cannot do if you get your own hardware. And then there is an additional cost of managing those things. So you need to hire someone to, like an ops person or an ops team, to set things up and all that stuff. So basically, you're saving cost by moving to the cloud. If that cost is a variable, if it's a question mark, then how useful is it to move to the cloud? That's a question to be answered, right? Okay, so those were the news items that I wanted to share for today. I also wanted to share this document. So this is a report on Java developer productivity by JRebel. Okay, JRebel is a solution. I don't know if it's like a company or just a solution. It's a popular solution by Perforce to manage your Java instances. You can do cool stuff like monitor, do hot reloads, and all that fun stuff. So they have released a Java developer productivity report for 2022, and I want to call out some key things here, some interesting stuff here. The 2022 Java Developer Productivity Report is an annual report that showcases the top tools, technologies, and development trends shaping the Java ecosystem. In addition, the report measures how advancement in these tools impacts Java development team productivity. One thing that I wanted to highlight is, in the foreword, they talk about how things have changed in the Java landscape, right? 10 years ago, we weren't talking about containers, Docker, Kubernetes, microservices, or even currently popular IDEs like IntelliJ and Visual Studio, right? IntelliJ wasn't as popular 10 years ago. And they have been doing this for 10 years, right? Since 2012. So 10 years ago, they were talking about what they might see in Spring 4, how long it might be until the Java 8 release. Nobody knew at the time that 10 years from now, we'll be looking at Java 18, right? 10 versions ahead, because Java was kind of slow cadence at the time. And then 10 years back, we were arguing about Java's position as the top programming language, although we are still doing that today. Are we still arguing about Java being the top programming language? Well, rest assured that we were doing that 10 years ago. In 2012, people were questioning, is it the end of Java? Is Java going away? We keep asking the same questions now. Isn't that interesting? All right. So we're going to go to the, like they talk about the survey methodology and all that stuff, but basically they've asked around 300-ish people. Let's see, 48% of the survey people are developers, and 22% are Java architects, 15% team leads. Team leads is a little bit of a fuzzy concept. A developer in one company can consider themselves a team lead in another company, so I don't usually attribute a lot of weightage to team lead. However, developer versus architect is a little more definitive difference. Most people have a team size of 3 to 9, which makes sense. 10 to 20 is a little too much. You wouldn't want to have that for, especially if you have agile teams, you want to have a team size of 3 to 9. That sounds about right. Most of them are enterprise companies with above 1,000 people, which is where Java shines, right? Java is really popular, and you can have code which scales when you have such a big sized company. So that also makes sense. Not surprised with that. So among the overall trends, so this is the JDK programming language used as your main application. Okay, the main application, because most companies have the mix. Main application, 37% of developers use Java 8. 29% of developers use Java 11, and 12% use Java 12 or newer, right? This is still way, way off. A lot of people are stuck with Java 8. And my advice to those people would be, don't worry about Java 11. Like I mentioned earlier, you should go to the next LTS version, which is Java 17. Don't switch to Java 11 now. Go to Java 17. You're going to be doing a migration anyway. You're going to have to go through those pains anyway. Go through it once and get to the latest rather than make these incremental changes. The migration process itself might be incremental. You're probably going to go to make sure things work for Java 11 and then Java 17. However you do it implementation-wise, doesn't matter. When you're hitting production, hit with the latest version, latest LTS version, so that you don't have to go through these multiple upgrades again and again. So they kind of split this version based on companies with under 100 employees and companies with over 100 employees. So Java 8 is used 35% of the times with companies with under 100 employees and 39% of the times with companies with over 100 employees. Either way, Java 8 is not a good place to be in, right? You're missing on a lot of good stuff with Java. It's like, I understand some initial hesitancy with moving to Java 9 because, okay, modularity, it's a big problem and all that stuff. But now we are way past it. So you should get going. So if you're an architect in one of these companies, please consider switching. If you're a developer and you don't have the power to get this effort going, please talk to your architect and get it going. It's going to get worse and worse over time. You don't want to be stuck in Java 8. You have to do it at some point, right? What's also interesting here is the other programming languages. Kotlin is used by 8% of the folks, which is very less, I'll admit. I thought it would be a little more. Groovy is used 6%, which is higher than I had thought. Okay, I thought Kotlin would be way higher than this. Java 7 or older, 5%. And Scala is used 3%, which is also a little less than what I had hoped for, right? Kotlin and Scala, I kind of presumed it would be a lot more. Upgrade influences. What factors influence your decision to upgrade JDK versions? The biggest factor is LTS, and it should be. I've been talking about LTS all the time. You want to have longer term support because you wouldn't want to keep switching every year or every 6 months, right? You want to be switched to a version, especially if you have a large code base, switch to a version and stay there for 3 years. LTS allows you to do that. So that's the highest kind of factor in companies deciding where they want to switch to. Here is another aspect, which is security, but I think security kind of comes with LTS. Because if you go to the latest version, in order to have security, you have to be in this constant churn of keeping upgrades going on, right? In order to get security updates, you go to LTS. One of the reasons why people go to LTS is so that they get these security updates and patches on a regular basis, and they're not stuck with an older version of Java. So security and LTS, I think, are kind of related. So they kind of get the maximum weightage in terms of factors that influence people's decisions to upgrade JDK versions. Not a surprise here. JDK 17 upgrade plans, right? 2021 marked the release of the latest LTS Java with JDK 17. While not as impactful to the overall market as Java 8, it does seem to have some momentum behind it that outpaces other post-Java 8 LTS releases, right? So here is the momentum. The momentum is people have been watchful. People have been like, yeah, I don't want to do Java 11. Should I do that? Well, now Java 17 is like, you're already 2 versions behind in LTS. It's time you catch up. So people who have been holding off on the Java 11 LTS version are going to be like, oh man, it's about time. We should do the update. It's kind of like a wake-up call, having another LTS version. And this is probably what's going to get those, last bunch of folks in Java 8 to switch to Java 17. So most people say they will switch within the next 6 months. 37% of them say that. 30% of them say sometime after the next 12 months. The problem with waiting for 12 months is your LTS version is going to be a year old, right? And you are going to get support for 3 years. So you're just going to wait for you're just going to get the benefit of LTS for 2 years. So I think people who are saying, yeah, I need a year to do a Java upgrade will have to rethink how they do these upgrades, because it's not usually feasible to take a year to do a Java upgrade. You should have good processes so that you kind of get there faster. 8% say never. Interesting. I would love to talk to somebody who has said that. But moving on, I'm going to quickly blaze through these things. The most popular JRE and JDK distribution used is Oracle Java at 36%. OpenJDK is 27%. Adopt OpenJDK Adoptium is 16%. Amazon Corretto is 7%. I think most of these people are basically just on AWS and they're just using Amazon Corretto. Zulu is 6%. GraalVM is 3%. Other is 3%. OpenLogic JDK is 2.3%. No surprises here that Oracle JDK is leading. I think they've kind of put the all licensing issues and all that fuss to rest. People are a little more open using Oracle JDK. What's the architecture of the main application that you develop? 32% of the people say they use microservices. 22% of the people say they use monolith. It is more towards microservices, which I hope is being evaluated and seriously considered. Here's what worries me. Companies under 100 employees, right? 28% of them are using microservices. My question is, do all of these 28% of people really need microservices when you have a company size that's under 100? Microservices are necessary for larger companies, okay? Larger companies need microservices because you want to be able to separate deployments. Smaller companies under 100, do you really need microservices? I don't know. 28% of them are using microservices. Thankfully, companies over 100 employees, the percentage of microservice usage is increased. It's around 36%. So that's good to know. But something to keep in mind is microservices is not always the answer. Make sure you really need it because you're going to be paying a cost to adopting and using microservices. You want to make sure you really need the benefits of microservices so that it's okay for you to pay the cost. Don't pay something that you're not going to get a value out of, right? So microservice adoption, 44% are fully microservice based overall. 44% are currently transitioning to microservices. 10% are talking about it. 2% tried, but it didn't work out. Okay. What I'm curious is how much of this 44% who are currently transitioning are going to go to the tried but didn't work out category. It'll be interesting. It's a journey, after all. I'm going to skip some of these stuff. This is an interesting part. What microservice application framework are you using on your main project? 74%. Overwhelmingly, people are using Spring Boot. Spring Boot is the choice for microservices in most of the situations I've seen. This is not a surprise. I wouldn't be surprised if this said something crazy like 85% or even 90% because it's an overwhelming choice at this point. So you cannot go wrong with Spring Boot. Other is 18%. I think the note here says it's Java EE or Jakarta EE as well as Vanilla Spring framework. Interesting that people are choosing Vanilla Spring for microservices, which is also Spring, and in a way goes to the Spring Boot category, kind of makes it easier for them to switch to Spring Boot later if they want to. The most common other response was that they weren't using a microservice framework at all, which makes sense. The other interesting part here is Quarkus is at 5%. Quarkus is another up and coming framework, which is super useful. I haven't personally used it a lot, but I do plan to try it out. But yeah, that's those are the top microservice framework usage. Lesson here: be good in Spring Boot. Everybody's using it. Okay, at least 74%. All right. Microservice application startup times. Have you experienced an increase in the time it takes to start up the services in your microservice application since the original transition creation of microservice? Has there been a change in the startup time for your microservice? So 35% of the people say no increase in startup times. It works just the same way. 13% say they got over 50% increase. That means you're probably doing something wrong. You shouldn't get this much of an increase with microservice startup compared to when you started it, right? You're probably overloading your microservice or something is wrong here. 10 to 50% increase is affecting 30% of people. But yeah, the majority is no increase, which is a good sign. Why the increase? The truth is there's a large variety of different reasons why companies are seeing this increase in startup times as microservice applications gradually gain modules and as development teams build their application beyond the initial creation of the app, companies are running into increased startup times much more similar to that shown in the monolithic applications, right? If you break something down into microservices, then you add a lot of stuff to it and the service kind of loses the micro in microservice. It's not a microservice anymore. It becomes a macro service. You're going to have these problems. You're going to end up with the same startup time problems that a monolith would have. So that's something to be careful about. And it's kind of like you have a drawback in either way, I should say. Like if you kind of break it down into multiple microservices, you have a cost there as well, right? There's a management cost involved. Each microservice is going to start faster, but if you have more, there's more cost involved in managing those. Or you can say, I'm not going to break it down further, put each microservice to be a little bit bigger. And now you kind of cut down on the management cost, but now the startup time for this microservice is a little bit more. So it's all about trade-offs. All right. What virtual machine platform do you use? Where are the Java applications run on? The most popular choice, close to half, is Docker. 41% of people are using Docker to run their Java applications. Okay, most popular selection. Kubernetes was second with 26%. I'd be interested to see what the containerized solution is. Usually Docker and Kubernetes. So I'm guessing some of those Kubernetes votes actually go to Docker as well. VMware is 16%. Hardly anybody is using Vagrant. NA is 10%, which means they're running on possibly bare metal or possibly some kind of a PaaS offering. I don't know what NA is. But yeah, so these are the most popular virtual machine platforms, containerized platforms. Again, Docker is leading the pack. All right, PaaS provider, AWS is leading with 31%. Application servers, Tomcat is leading with 48%. Tomcat is still ruling in the list of application servers. All right. And then build tools, Maven is leading with 68%. Gradle didn't quite become as popular as people hoped it would be, right? People still prefer Maven for whatever reason. I kind of prefer Maven too because I've never found the need to switch to Gradle. Maven is like, they say, yeah, it's verbose and it has a lot of stuff. I have no problem with verbose because I don't usually use, pom.xml. I just write it and then it's done. I don't mess with it a lot. So it works. I haven't found the need for Gradle, but some people swear by it. Not many, apparently. Maven's still leading with 68%. Ant is still holding on with 6%. I remember working with Ant back in 2006 was when I first learned about Ant. I'm kind of glad to hear that people are still using Ant. 6% of people are still using Ant, which is kind of nice. Popular IDE, IntelliJ is the most popular with 48% usage. Eclipse is next with 24%. VS Code is third with 18%. I think VS Code is growing in usage. Eclipse is reducing in usage. CI/CD trends, Jenkins is being used 46% of the time. No surprises there. And commit frequency. How many times do you commit code in your CI/CD build per day? 35% of people say 5+ times. This is a good thing to have. You have continuous integration and continuous delivery. It's a good sign that your people are committing more often. That means that there is a good suite of tests, automated tests that run whenever you commit. That kind of allows people to commit on a regular basis. All right. I'm going to skip the rest of this report. Hopefully this was helpful. This is the Developer Productivity Report by JRebel. You can do a Google search and find this report. I'm also going to try and post a link to this report in the description so you can check it out. I want to introduce you to a library. So this is in the last episode of The Artifact, I had this library of the week thing. This is not so much a library, but it is a very handy framework/library thingy, which is something called PicoCLI or PicoCLI. I don't know if it's pronounced or you just say PicoCLI. It is a way for you to build command line applications that can run on the JVM. If you ever want to build CLI tools, CLI applications using Java, you should check this out. It's a pretty handy tool. So the way this works is you basically annotate your Java class, which has a main method, with the @command annotation, and you specify a bunch of properties, right? You specify what that command is about, what is a description about the command, put that annotation on top of your main method. And then you have these annotations for parameters. You want to accept a parameter for your command, you just declare a member variable for your class and stick the @parameters annotation on top of it. Then your CLI that's generated is going to accept this as a parameter, right? You specify what the parameter is, what the description of the parameter is, and it kind of does a bunch of stuff around it, okay? So you declare it as a dependency, and then you have these annotation processors that kind of do this thing for you. So you kind of have a declarative style of creating CLI applications. Typically, what do you do when you create a CLI? You provide some kind of a help, right? Somebody enters the CLI and they don't provide your necessary arguments. Well, then your CLI kind of gives you a help, right? If they want to get information about what are the parameters you need, it kind of has description about what the parameter is, what are the alternatives. So these are things that you can very easily add to your Java class using these annotations. So this is a PicoCLI. Check it out. If you want to play around with CLIs, you're creating a CLI, this is a good way to do this. All right. So with this, we're going to wrap up today's news roundup and updates. And with that, we conclude this episode of The Artifact. I hope you found it useful. Stay tuned for more weekly episodes coming up with more news, updates, and interviews available at theartifact.io as podcast on your favorite podcast applications and on the Artifact YouTube channel. Thank you for listening and watching.